I am a passer fan, death to bending crooked words with a witless word. In the end, good will triumph over evil. Through my experience, people will know that demons are real. People say that God is dead, but how can they think that if I show them the devil?
This is your nautical lantern on the dangerous seas of darkness. Let's push off from the placid shore of the status quo and explore what's beyond the horizon. I am your host, BT, and this is Truth and Shadow, your podcast of the supernatural.
There's a kind of prison you won't find on any map, a cell that no builder laid bricks for. It doesn't appear on satellite images or blueprints, but it exists all the same, in kitchens, in pews, in quiet bedrooms and bustling city streets. I've sat in that prison, so have you. It's not behind bars, but behind beliefs. See, most people think captivity wears chains, but the truth is, captivity wears names. Not names like Tom or Sarah, but names like worthless, alone, unwanted, dirty, failure. You know the ones. Somewhere along the road of childhood or heartbreak, we heard them, whispered in moments of pain, muttered in memories that hurt too much to remember straight. And something inside us agreed. Not because we loved the lies, but because the truth seemed unreachable, or worse, undeserved. And that's the trick. Evil doesn't just enslave with terror, it seduces with logic. You messed up, you hurt someone, you weren't enough for your father, or your husband, or your God, so now you wear that name. The shame sticks, and somewhere deep, you believe that if you carry it long enough, maybe one day you'll be worthy enough to take it off. But that's not redemption. That's penance, disguised as personality. Let me tell you a story. When I was a teenager, I stole something from a grocery store. Just a dumb prank, peer pressure. Nobody saw, no alarms, but I saw. And for years, I wore the name Thief. Not in public, not on my driver's license, but deep inside. And I began to interpret everything through it. I didn't deserve good things. If people really knew me, they'd walk away. I carried the guilt in my pocket like a relic. That's what sin does when it's never confessed. It mutates into our identity. It keeps you locked in a cell where the door was always open, but you never noticed. And you want to know the cruelest part, most sinister part? You put those chains on yourself. Most people think spiritual warfare means spitting heads and screaming priests. But the older I get, the more I see that darkness operates like a lawyer, not a lunatic. Evil spirits are legalists. They cling to technicalities. They claim territory through agreement. If you nod to the lie, even silently, they interpret it as an open door. That's why deliverance isn't usually loud. It's methodical, precise. Like tearing up contracts you never meant to sign. Let me give you an example. A woman I know. Let's call her Barbara. Barbara grew up in a household ruled by alcoholism. Her father would be gentle one minute, a monster the next. Barbara survived her childhood by becoming invisible. Years later, she couldn't keep a healthy relationship. Every time someone got close, she'd sabotage it. I'm too much, she'd say. I'm ruining everything. And it wasn't until a quiet moment of prayer when someone asked her to name the lie that it surfaced. You're a burden. See, Barbara had agreed with it as a child, and now it followed her around like a shadow. And the breakthrough came not with yelling, screaming into pillows, but with a confession where she said, I believed I was a burden, but I'm not. I renounce that lie. I forgive my father and I release him to God. Barbara said it out loud. And I swear I saw her posture change like a weight had fallen off her back. That's deliverance. It's not about yelling demons out. It's about canceling their right to stay. Back in the 90s, I used to love the old X-Files TV show. My favorite character, Fox Mulder, would be pacing in the dark. He's digging through these boxes labeled classified, where he's trying to catch a break in a case. The truth is out there, he'd whisper, and week after week, the government lied, the aliens got away, and the smoking man, he lit another cigarette. It was fun, but incomplete. The real conspiracy isn't in Area 51, it's in your heart. The lies we believe are far more dangerous than any alien plot, because those lies shape our identity, and if you think you're broken, you'll live broken. If you think you're dirty, you'll hide your face from love. If you think you're alone, you won't ask for help. And oddly enough, the devil isn't creative. He just keeps repackaging through the millennia the same lies. He says you're not good enough. He says you're not loved. He'll say you'll never change. The plot twist? You can say no. Deliverance is an act of treason against the false self. It's not just healing, it's rebellion. It's a mutiny against the agreements you made when your soul was young and when you were scared. We've been told a version of the gospel that's a little too polite. It's very whitewashed. I mean, it forgives, but it doesn't free. It tells you Jesus died for your sins, but doesn't show you how to cancel the contracts you made with hell while you were suffering. Now, I'm not here, of course, to criticize churches, the Bible, because as a faithful Christian myself, I know many of them preach the cross with sincerity. But I'll say this. If your gospel doesn't break chains, then it's not big enough, because Jesus didn't just forgive your past. He broke the power of it. And that means repentance isn't groveling. It's a realignment. Forgiveness isn't a feeling. It's a jailbreak. Renunciation isn't spooky. It's legal. When you say, I reject the lie, I'm dirty, I renounce the spirit of shame, I forgive the ones who hurt me, and I receive the blessings of the Father who calls me clean. And that is how the prison walls fall, one word at a time. There's another kind of haunting no one talks about. The haunting of silence. The absence of a blessing. The echo of a father who never spoke the words you needed to hear. I know this wound well. I didn't have a father, so he was absent from me. I never got to hear the words that I am strong. I never got to hear the words that he's proud of me. Never said, you've got what it takes. And instead, I've spent years trying to earn those words from bosses, pastors, women. And when they didn't come, I turned to shame. And then one day, someone asked me, what do you think your Heavenly Father would say to you? I had no idea. So they prayed with me. And what I heard wasn't thunder, it wasn't fire, it was simple. You are my son. You are my son, and I'm proud of you. I wept like a boy, not because it was dramatic, but because that silence was finally broken. And sometimes the most powerful thing in deliverance isn't casting something out, it's inviting the Lord in. So what are we really talking about? Well, we're talking about a war older than Eden. A war not for your body, but for your identity, for your soul. A war not for your behavior, but for your agreement, for your admittance. The enemy knows he can't change God's love for you, but he can change who you are in your own mind. If he can get you to wear guilt like a second skin, then he's won. The key is you have authority, not because you're strong, but because Jesus has already won. So you confess what was hidden. You forgive what still hurts. You renounce what was whispered. You say no to the lies. You say yes to the blessing. You don't need a stage. You just need your voice and his name. Say it out loud. No more. No more shame. No more guilt. No more inner vows or silent chains. You are free. Not just legally, not just theologically, but actually, truly, eternally. The prison door was never locked. You just needed to stand up and walk out. And that is the truth. Everything else is shadow.
Some battles aren't just emotional, psychological, or even physical. They are spiritual. Maybe you felt it, an overwhelming heaviness that won't lift, a cycle of fear, addiction, or despair that no amount of willpower can seem to break. Maybe you've sensed something lurking in the unseen, something that doesn't belong yet refuses to go. But what if freedom is possible? What if there was a way to break these unseen chains? Not just through prayer, but through a ministry of deliverance. A ministry that dares to confront the forces that bind people and cast them out. If you've ever wondered whether there's some struggles that have a deeper spiritual root, you're not alone. Today we're going to talk about it. Our guest is trained in the deliverance ministry, has experienced these things, and is searching for answers in this strange world. He is the chain breaker, the overcomer, and the firebrand. Brandon Spain, welcome to Truth and Shadow podcast.
Hey, bro. Welcome for having me on, man. This is a real privilege to be on your show.
So let's talk about you for a minute. Like I said, you've been trained in some deliverance ministry. Let's talk about that and get that out of the way so people know a little bit more about Brandon Spain other than being a host on the Unrefined podcast.
Yeah. I think my first introduction to the supernatural years ago when I was in college, after I was converted, was this avenue. It was deliverance. It was a demonic. It was a demonic manifestation. I was at the BSU and in college, and this guy had a full blown. There was no doubt that it was a demonic manifestation just because of the symptoms, the higher pitched voice, and all that kind of stuff. Now I don't know if it meet the criteria of some exorcists and stuff like that. The deliverance is a little bit lower threshold, which we can get into in the show. But that was my first experience with a supernatural encounter with that. And then I started studying and reading about it. And then I started getting attacks. I would wake up in the mornings with scratches and bruises on my body, and there was no way that I got those. It kind of crescendoed one night with a friend of mine who was kind of going through this journey with me, a Baptist man, which is crazy, but yeah, we were going through it together. And I was trying to read my Bible and I couldn't see. I went blind, couldn't see anything. And I had him. I don't know how I called him. We didn't have cell phones then, but I think I used the phone and managed to get him over there. And he came and prayed for me using these three really, I'm not even going to tell you what books we were reading because they're so like, what's the word for it? Jack chickish. I'll leave it alone like there. But he, whatever he did got him out and I could see. And so, yeah, that was my first introduction to the supernatural was the dark side of the supernatural and fighting it and getting rid of it. And I just had to have some answers. And so I just dove into that world and could devour anything I could get from books to trainings to DVD sets to everything. And Sandy and I, over the years, we had a retreat center and we did a lot of deliverance at this retreat center and a lot of emotional healing too. Because they kind of go hand in hand. If you don't take care of I used to say, if you don't take care of the house the demon lives in, the demon will come back and bring 7 more. So the emotional healing aspect is kind of tearing down the house. And then the demons are like shooing flies out the room. And I'm not making light of the demonic forces or anything, but that's just kind of, he is the Lord of the Flies. So anyway.
Yeah, we've been reading together a book by Francis McNutt, and I'll put the link to the book in the show notes.
Yeah, awesome.
Deliverance from Evil Spirits, a Practical Manual. And we've read this together, so a little bit about Francis McNutt, I guess, is necessary. So he was a Catholic, he was a prominent theologian and author, and he spent a lot of time in this deliverance ministry. And one of the main purposes of the book was to answer those questions. Do evil spirits oppress people today? And can Christians be affected by evil spirits? Because that's a big hot topic.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that, you and I, back and forth about whether Christians can be affected by evil spirits. And this book was pretty awesome. What were your thoughts and ideas and opinions about it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it because I got the renewed version. I read it many years ago because I did all 3 levels of his training. He has a 3-level training thing, and it was right before he passed. And he was such a gracious, interesting. He was a priest, and he met a nun, and then he left the priesthood to marry a nun. So his wife, who's still, but he still kept like really strong ties with the church, and bishops would come to him, and he was an expert in his area. It was never I don't even ordain an exorcist in the Catholic Church. Just never sanctioned as an exorcist, but just an incredible man. And his discernment was what really blew me away. He could. He would train people, and they would do prayer with you. And if they got stuck, he could bring the person, and he would nail the spirit, And he was an amazing man. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did all right.
Yeah. The book was fascinating, and he added more stuff. I think his wife Judith came back and added more stuff after he passed away. And particularly the parts about dealing with, which I'll get into later in this podcast because I got to share a story, but dealing with fragments, parts, DID, disassociation, because a lot of people get that confused with demons, and we'll dive into that. But she added a lot to it. So this book was like refreshing. I needed a refresher course in this.
Yeah, and something else that's really interesting is, if you were to take this topic today, right? It's like, let's be real, right? People, when they hear about demons and deliverance, some of them think it's just, some kind of outdated superstition, right? But other people have had experiences and they make them, it will convince somebody that spiritual warfare is real. And so when we're looking at this book and we're reading this book, and since it's something that you were trained in, have you ever had like a moment where you wondered, is this just bad luck or is there something deeper at play?
Oh, dude, I'm going through that right now. I'm not going to go into details. I mean, and that's you know me well enough, BT, to know that I want the truth. I don't want hype. I don't want, I don't want to just believe a conspiracy because it's floating out there. There's one going out there now, and I'm still not sure if it really is or people reading into it. But even in the deliverance world, you have charlatans in this world just as much as you do any other type of ministry or whatever, all different stripes and types. And I remember before I was into all this, there was a guy who would come on TV at night, and he would do things that at the time I thought were really weird. But now, since I'm Anglican and part of more of a liturgical type church, I find value in, like crucifixes and Bibles and oil and holy water, particularly big time. But yeah, I mean, it's a minefield riddled field. And I think a lot of the enemy right now is he's trying to, like old C.S. Lewis said, he's trying to just evaporate himself. He's being blatant in our culture, in the Western culture, and in your face. But then they're making it up, like this book I was reading about Son of Sam. They're making up, well, we're just trying to find order to our chaos, and we're equating it to Satan, which is old philosophy. And that's not true either. And so, yeah. So I just it's very rewarding though to see someone delivered. But yeah, I've had several times. You don't want to find a demon around every bush, but like we interviewed a guy last week or a week before last, and he does cleansing of houses and stuff like that. And I said, I just get sick of some of these particular part of the church that just see demons everywhere. And he's like, well, you don't need to worry about that. He's basically like, sometimes there's not a demon around every bush, but every other bush. And I'm like, okay, well, there's some wisdom there, and so, and I have seen too, BT, I have seen people in ministries where they, I'm going to say it wrong. I am pareidolia, where they see demons everywhere, and it's just not, it could be mental issues. And we can get into mental issues too, because I have a unique theory about mental. I think they're real and they're organic, but I think there's always a demonic footprint behind a lot of our mental issues, particularly schizophrenia. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we all go through struggles, right? I mean, yeah. And we've got to figure out where that line is between the normal life challenges, everyday situations, and
sometimes life just sucks. Some days we have sucky days. I mean, really,
That's what it is. Yeah. But there's also like real, like spiritual oppression. But I thought what we should do is take a moment, because I've spoken to Jungian psychologists and who are experts in what's known as shadow work. And this is a field of study that's pretty amusing to me, not amusing, funny, but interesting, because
it's fascinating.
It touches on exactly what we're going to talk about. In Jungian psychology, people have parts. And it's not always the person's personality that's making itself known. And so we should take a moment to talk about, real things. Like, I mean, it's like, is this really just anxiety, screaming out at us? Or is this depression? I mean, is this is there a part of us of an untreated trauma, untreated childhood trauma, or untreated past trauma, hurt, that is going on, or is it something else? So let's talk about some of these dissociative disorders, these parts and things that may actually be going on, that it's not always a demon in the gaps.
Yeah. We found that some can be sentient. we just interviewed a guy that's going to be released real soon, who his whole basic, he's a psychiatrist, and his whole basic ministry is dealing with schizophrenia and the energetic. I think these sentient beings are a form of energetic thing. That's why they read up on EMPs and stuff like that. They're still part of another dimension. They're still part of extra dimensional stuff, but they manifest themselves energetically in the world. And the thing that with this guy that really stuck out at me, he says, you never find a schizophrenic that has a voice that tells it good things like, you're wonderful today. You look marvelous. You're an awesome person. They're always negative. Now, why would our human psyche always give us negative things all the time, and that shows some form of a sentience there. But at the same time, going back to what you're saying, sometimes it's just a footprint of perhaps a demon or an entity that has been there and has left, but it's left its footprint there organically. And I'm not one of these people that shy away from drugs. I think I don't like the pharmaceutical industry. I will say that, but I don't shy away from drugs. Drugs help save my life from me killing myself in depression. So they have a place. However, they are way over prescribed and way, that's the answer to everything. That's the reverse side of what you're talking about. One of our first experiences of doing Deliverance, BT, was this story, and I told you, but I want to tell the audience. We were praying with this woman and shared voices and all this kind of stuff, and I was just I just was sure it was sentient, it was demonic, and and I was casting it out. And I'm never loud. I'm not. I don't like hype, and so I after I went through a lot of the stuff I went through in college, I just knew my authority, who I was in Christ, and I could just speak to a spirit, and it would go. I didn't know hype, no yelling, no screaming, no foaming at the mouth, none of that kind of stuff, and I just knew the authority that I had in Christ, and nothing was happening. It was like a log jam. We couldn't get rid of this, and it wasn't until later on. We saw her, we gave her some relief and some help, but it wasn't until later on till I got more training in what you're talking about, some of the parts, that type of stuff. It was part of her. It was a part of her that had been fragmented. It wasn't a full-blown altar. Now, we distinguish Sandy and I, and people in this ministry, in this world, distinguish it all different kinds of ways. You have parts, fragments, altars. We call them parts, and then if they're full-blown personalities, we call them altars. And those are rare. Those are usually the ones you deal with SRA and really deep level type stuff, because that's what MK Ultra and all those things, they program altars to, think Philadelphia, was it Philadelphia Experiment? No. Yeah. With Denzel, or with that movie where they killed the president. Anyway, that's altar type stuff. Jason Bourne, altar type stuff. But we all have fragments from, like you said, from trauma, childhood traumas and stuff like that. And it's really hilarious when you're married. I mean, Sandy and I, since we've been trained in it, we can see when we switch parts sometimes. And the goal is to let those parts, we let Jesus deal with them, whether he wants to incorporate them, whether he wants to take them away, or whatever Jesus wants to do with them. We give him free reign to deal with those parts. But those parts are very much a part of ourselves, and very much a part of, like, even our shadow selves, or Jung was on to a lot of stuff. And I know a lot of people think he was a cult, and he had some occultic stuff. However, he was we need to eat the meat and spit out the bones there. I mean, there's people out there that have revelation that we need as the church, and it could free people. And he had a lot of Swedenborg is another example of that. He gets benign and a lot of stuff, but he had, just a real understanding of spiritual laws and how we live in, what I call secondary cause universe. We're not direct cause. We're not nominalist. We're we're, good Thomists, and there's secondary causes in the universe, and spiritual laws come into play there. If I jump off a building, I jumped off the building. God didn't make me jump off the building. And so, but that, I'm saying all that because that comes into play with what we're talking about with the deliverance type stuff, because not everything is caused by an outside sentient being. It comes from the inside of our psyche, inside of our souls and egos and all that kind of stuff too. Does that answer your question? I feel like I'm just rambling and
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we have to look at, and we have to look at closely, is the thought and idea that some Christians will say, or some Christians, some people will say that, hey, if you're saved, a demon can't touch you. And others, like us, will say, no, actually Christians can experience oppression, possession. And it's like, how do you answer people like that? I mean, it's typically what we do is, me, I just let a person think those things until they've had an experience. And I think that is what we have to talk about. And it's like, have you ever seen a believer struggle with something that's more than just a personal issue?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's mostly what we've done ministry with is believers. And I'm not going to sit here and say to every person I pray with, oh, you're not a believer because you had this error, because I've seen fruit in their lives. And, and it says in the word that if you see fruit in someone's life, the Christian fruit. And we also have to realize that at least the Protestant church, which I hate this. I mean, I am Protestant, even though I don't. Yeah. Anyway, we won't go there. But they've mistaken a lot of the in our baptismal liturgy that we have in the Anglican Church. It does nothing about renouncing Satan and all his works. There's no deliverance aspect at the baptism, which is where a lot of it should have happened, or it should have happened through catechesis, through discipleship beforehand. That's where you get it. And the spirits, you ask how I would tell people. I'm very flippant about it. I say, I don't care if your demon is on your shoulder, if it's on your nose, if it's on your head, just get rid of it. If you have a sentient being that's oppressing you, that is causing chaos, and that's a huge red flag, chaos. And that's kind of like what we're going through right now. I was telling you about. If you have something causing chaos in your life or in different areas of your life, chances are there's a red flag. There's either something there, or there was something there that's like I say, tip the domino and the dominoes are falling. And yeah, we just got to grow up and get along and get out of semantics. I've noticed a lot of people, particularly when I first came in the podcasting space, they talk past each other. We need to define common words and it not be a semantic war. And if we're talking about the same thing, and I've watched it being in the middle, I've watched one side say this and the other side say this, and I'm like, you're both right. You're just not communicating well, which actually is what those beings love to do, man. They love to twist words. I don't know how many times I've told my wife something, then I'll say, what did I just say? And she hears something totally different. Now some of that is life. Some of that is just, bad listening skills, which I'm the worst listener of the two of us. But some of it, I believe, gets twisted before it gets to, because they deal with frequency. And that's another thing we can go into later, is the demonic deals with frequency and all those unseen things out there. They manipulate those things to manipulate us, to get us to do what they want us to do.
Yeah, and I think there's also like a misunderstanding about how deliverance ministry works. I mean, a lot of us will watch, the movie came out, The Exorcist, and it's just, got somebody chained to the bed, and this is a deliverance situation. I mean, first and foremost, okay, sure, it's an exorcism, and this is a whole lot different, but deliverance can happen in your therapist's office, on the couch. It can happen on a bar stool as you're talking to your buddy over a pint. I mean, it's deliverance that comes in many shapes and forms, because we're beginning to understand and realize that it's not all just demons. Sometimes it's literally untreated trauma. And that's part of that speaking over or speaking cross or above somebody or whatever, past somebody, is where our traumas are at. But
yeah, definitely. I mean, Sandy and I, one of our missions since we love simplification because we think the early church was like a virus. It was so simple that it spread like a movement. It's a wildfire. So the different areas of our ministry, we've tried to simplify it. Like, and like what you just said, we want to be able to do healing or with trauma, or healing with fragments, or healing with the demonic over a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Yeah. You can send our check to BT for that advertisement. But anyway, no, but seriously, if it's, we as human beings, because of the fall, we love to overcomplicate things. And sometimes it's just so simple. I mean, I have seen demons come out of people who just had a mention of a word and their life was changed. You know, we did this one couple. And to this day, it's been like 10 years, they still send us emails encouraging us that we saw the man and the woman. And I cast two spirits out of this man, and their marriage completely turned around. I mean, it wasn't a lot of in-depth counseling. It wasn't a lot. He just had two, oppression or sentient or whatever it was in him that were speaking, and it caused chaos in his life. And once they were gone, him and his wife got along. Are they perfect? Probably not. But man, it's amazing to get those emails.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because if you're honest about it, deliverance can make a lot of people feel uncomfortable, right? Many will avoid it completely. Even, and this is what's really weird, is even churches that teach that deliverance is possible, they just completely avoid the ministry.
Well, a lot of it's because of, I'm sorry to interrupt you, BT, but a lot of it's because of what you just talked about, because of Hollywood. Hollywood has, not just in the Catholic sense of with exorcisms, but also to personify evangelicals and make them look like idiots. It overdoes that, like throwing up and spitting up and head, just crazy stuff. And so Hollywood has done a lot to push, that out of it. And so people are scared of it.
Yeah, I think the other issue is it's like maybe it's just people not wanting to acknowledge that the unseen world is real.
Well, one of the best examples, and we talk a lot about re-enchantment, and that's a theme I love. I love that. I think the whole Western church needs to be re-enchanted. I mean, all of us, and particularly though the Protestants and the evangelicals, but we need this re-enchantment where it's, and one of my favorite examples of this is in Lord of the Rings when Theoden has his Grima worm tongue. Sandy, I actually call, when we're doing ministry, we say, does this person have a worm tongue speaking in their ear? Because there's power there in words. It's not even demonic. It's just the drip. Anyway, but one of the most powerful examples of deliverance to me is when Gandalf the White casts Saruman out of Theoden. I mean, it's such a prime example of what the deliverance ministry should be and how the transformation occurs sometimes so fast.
Yeah, now let's say somebody does get delivered, right? Now what? I mean, can they go right back to their life as usual? I mean, is there something they need to be doing to stay free?
Well, you know me well enough to know that I'm going to say discipleship. I mean, that to me, I think that is the bane of Isildur. Use the same in the church. We don't know how to disciple people because it's become so programmatic, and it needs to be more relational. And I just think that if everybody in the church, and I mean, this is like every denomination, if you took one person and poured into one person, the church would be a force for good in this world that would be unlike any other. And that's what the early church was. And they just lost their way with that. There's no blame game there. It's not Rome. It's not Constantine. It was just life. And when we get back to having, and this can be done with what we're already doing, discipleship can permeate our liturgy, it can permeate our groups, it can permeate everything. That discipleship and that one-on-one and that being, and that's where AA does something right. You have a sponsor, and we need to have, quote, sponsors in the church. We need to have somebody in our life. I mean, like you're not an ordained priest, but you're my priest, man. I mean, I come to you and I ask you stuff and I bounce stuff off of you. And we need to have people like that in our lives to All right, am I being crazy, BT? Am I being paranoid? Yes, you are, Brandon. so we need people like that in our lives, So that's the answer, BT, to it is a thoroughgoing discipleship, and it has to be a discipleship that's not just left brain cognitive. It has to be. We're reading that Rod Dreher book. It has to be also a right brain enchanted supernatural discipleship as well.
And we talk about trauma, and there's a lot of different kinds of trauma out there, from emotional hurt, people who they love harder now because they didn't have love when they were younger. So these are traumas, and so basically, some people believe that before a person can really honestly be fully delivered, right? I mean, it's not like a one and done. It's a process of deliverance, that they need healing from these past wounds, right? And I think it's because trauma can give demons a foothold, or our past trauma can mutate into other conflict avoidance situations, which lead to other issues. So, do you think that emotional healing and deliverance should go hand in hand?
Hand in hand, absolutely. And to simplify it, but then I'll go a little deeper. It should be, you got flies at your trash can, take out the trash. Then you swat the leftover flies. I mean, that's my simplification of it. That has to go. If you leave the trash in the can, all you're going to attract is more flies. You could swat all of them, you could spray them, but they'll be back. And to go into more depth with that, I mean, I consider all this part of discipleship, and it's what I call the put off ministry part. Paul talks about you need to put off the old man and put on the new man, and this is the put off the old man aspect. This is the getting the if you use the Mark 4 parable of the seeds, this is getting the stones and the different things out of your soil for you to be able to plant seeds in those different areas and stuff. And this is what's weird, BT, about the whole thing, is that we can have, and I mean, this is me to a core, we can have areas in our life where we excel, where we're grown, and where we operate in wisdom. And then we can have other areas compartmentalized where we have trauma, where we act like a 12-year-old. I mean, and the more you get to know people, we get confused with it, but if you have an understanding of the human person and then the fact of trauma, and we've even encountered people that have had accidents, car wrecks, seen traumatic things that these spirits, and like, for example, I had an accident when I was in 10th grade, and I got some kind of a trauma bond or some kind of a trauma wound from it, from just being swirled around think about the motion and all that from it. And I was getting ministry, and there was a demonic entity in there just from the trauma of me having a car wreck. And they're opportunists. They're looking for ways to get into your life. It's not just a matter of sin or open doors, even though that does matter. They're squatters. I mean, people a lot of times, I differ a little bit with some deliverance ministers. They talk about open doors, and I believe in that. You can open the door to the enemy into your life with sin and with different types of things. However, there's also this whole aspect of it says the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Well, thieves don't come through open doors or knock on and say, okay, I'm coming in. Thieves come through the window in the back. And Jesus even talks about the sheep gate. Somebody came in illegally through the sheep gate. So, there's more to it than just open doors and sin. And the disciples, even in the Gospels, wanted to blame, tit for tat. Is it because of their sin that this house fell on them and all that kind of stuff? And Jesus is like, no, it's a lot more complicated than that. It's a lot grayer than that, disciples. God sees black and white, but you don't. And you need his spirit inside of you, dwelling in you, to guide you and to help you discern what's really going on. And that's what it all boils down to. What addressing your question earlier, BT, is we need discernment. We need to know. And if we don't have it, we need to have people around us that do. And women, women have, I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Your wife has intuition that I dream of having about different things. I mean, I don't feel right about that dude. I mean, and I mean, every time I don't listen to Sandy, I always eat crow. It's really weird. And it's just that we have to have that discernment. We have to cultivate that discernment. We have to be able to discern, I think it talks about in Hebrews, we have to go from, drinking milk and to eating meat. And that requires intimacy with the Lord and relationship with him. And the discernment is just kind of a fruit that comes out of that. So
it's true. I mean, people can spend their whole lives struggling with things that they assume are just like a part of them, right? Mm-hmm. Crippling fear, irrational anger. There's some addictions, maybe even self-hatred. But deliverance ministers will often say that it's unforgiveness that's one of the biggest open doors to spiritual oppression. And I don't mean not forgiving other people, but forgiving ourselves.
Yes, huge. Or let me throw another one out, BT. Not forgiving God. Okay. All right. Let me unpack that, because people are like, oh, heretic. Oh, what is No, God doesn't sin, but our interpretations, particularly from really bad theology, example, I have another story. I was a kid, I was in third grade, and this kid, you've heard this probably, this kid stole my jacket. He stole my jacket, and I was mad and angry. And anyway, come to find out, my mom had written my name in it. And so we found it. The kid, gave it back, and then the kid died a week later. And my mother, well-meaning, we have a lot of folk theology is what I call it. It's just, particularly down here in the South. I mean, we have all these false, everybody becomes an angel, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, all this folk theology. My mother, unwilling, didn't mean to, just told me, look, God always sees, he always finds out. And I grew up my whole life thinking that he sees you when you're sleeping. I was afraid that if I did something wrong, God was going to burn me up in a house fire. And that was deep down in my psyche, deep down in my soul. I even forgot about it until I got ministry and it came up, and I realized that I had to forgive God. He didn't do anything wrong, but I had to forgive him, because in my child brain, he did something wrong, and I had resentment towards him. So I had to forgive him.
Yeah, I think there's
myself.
There's a truism in that with forgiving God, because life doesn't turn out the way that we want it, right?
Yeah.
We can dream that life is supposed to be cotton candies and cotton candy and unicorns, but it turns out that it's more than that. It's dark. Bad things happen, and we can usually blame God for all the bad that happens.
Yeah.
And then when we blame God, we eventually don't forgive him, and so we're stuck with those hurts. It's like and so it's basically what I'm saying is that there's people out there who seem to live relatively peaceful lives, right? We'll look out and we'll see the grass is greener, and this is an actual truism. Grass is greener in some people's lives.
Yes.
And we might be going through some constant battles, generational strongholds, spiritual attacks, things like persistent oppression. And so why do you think that some people seem to be more vulnerable than others?
Well, one of my biggest, I have two answers to that. One is just they come out of dealing with ex-addicts up here for a season. Particularly people addicted to meth and stuff like that. They have open doors, and they do the open doors when they're on drugs. So they don't know, they don't remember, they don't have that's one. The other biggest one is the fact that we just we live life and stuff just happens to us, and just little small things, and particularly when we're kids. I forget the psychological, but it's like everything's formed by a certain age where you're a full, you're full whatever it is developed by a certain age, and your full understanding of the world. Maybe that's what it is. And then you kind of add to it as you go along, and then you have bad theology from church, not all church, just some churches, and you begin to ascribe things to God, and it's like this story I tell all the time. There's this boy who thought that firemen started fires, and the reason he thought that is because every time he drove by a fire, he saw the firemen there, and he thought the firemen started fires. And that's what we do with God a lot of times. He's there because he is Emmanuel. He is the God who is present. He is the God who is, even manifestly present, and we see him there, and then we will say, well, maybe he caused it, but no, he's there to put out the fire. And that understanding really helped shape me to understand his goodness, even when I don't understand his goodness. I don't like a lot of these people that think they try to equate our definition of goodness to God, because his definition of goodness, I'm not an anomalist, but at the same time, his definition of goodness is different and is deeper and more expansive than ours is. And we don't always see that and what comes out in the, at the other end. But it's just, we have to have patience with the whole understanding of how our life just kind of unfurls and unfolds like a tapestry. And one of the things that Sandy and I say a lot, and I think this is pretty accurate, we usually say that if it's not good yet, then God's not done yet. And so right when you're in the middle of the chaos and you're in the middle of the different stuff, give God time to work stuff out. I was doing a meditation this past week, and I just got this huge download right in the middle of the meditation. And it's helped me so much this past week. And the Lord basically told me, when you break your arm, to heal it, I have to set it. And when I set your arm, it hurts. And so a lot of times we pray for things. We're praying for things in our lives that we won't. And they're good things. They're good things that God wants for us, but he has to set that arm, and he has to go through processes and all this stuff for the arm to be set for it to heal. And man, that just I cried. I wept like a baby. I'm like, how many times am I quick to judge God because of, he's setting my arm and I'm seeing chaos happen in my life, but I'm praying for something. And then I wonder, why is it so chaotic? And, we see other people, like you said, the grass is greener. They pray one thing and then they get the answer the next day, and we think, well, what's wrong with me? And, it's not wrong. But the other thing I was wanting to go into is, I think a lot of people get attacked because of their metron, and that's a Greek word for their calling or for their not purpose, but their vocation in ministry and in life. And some of us, when the day you take Jesus serious and you go from being a convert to being a disciple, is the day you get put on hell's top 10 list. I mean, it's a long list, but you get put on that list and he gratuitously goes after you. And that's not just shade tree theology. I mean, there's a reality to that the enemy wants to thwart the cause that God has put on our lives. And I think a lot of attacks and stuff happen just simply because of that.
Yeah, I think we're really talking about fear of the unknown, or fear of confrontation, I guess.
Yeah.
Could I even say fear of being delivered? There's many people out there who will hesitate to engage in spiritual warfare because they're afraid. And so we know that fear is a very powerful weapon of the enemy.
Yes.
And even doing deliverance ministry, have you ever felt fear rise up when you were trying to step closer to God and help people out? Absolutely.
And a lot of times in my life, the fear is I get worried about what he's going to do with those around me that I love. If he can't get me, he'll get my wife or my kids or our livelihood or other things like that. And I mean, Job, people misinterpret Job so awful. The book of Job is not about how bad God can make it for him. The book of Job is like Job is a battleground for a cosmic war. And it's not between God and Satan, or the Satan. It's between us and the Satan. And he's equipping us to one day to be able to judge angels, to be able to judge Elohim. And we have to go through boot camp. And that to me is the story of Job. He's putting Job through boot camp. And he wrestles with, I mean, what are the hardest things we hear when we're going through a tough time? Other people say. People have so many reasons why we're going through what we're going through. And we ultimately have to turn. I love what you say all the time. It's me and my conscience that stands before God. You know, that makes you a good Lutheran there. I'm joking. Anyway, but not he's not Lutheran. Anyway, but there's still truth to that though. It ultimately comes down. I'm the one that's going to stand before God, not these naysayers or people around me, but me. And that whole book is. And when I started to see it as a spiritual warfare manual, a battle, it opened up completely. Instead of people going in and cherry picking things about, oh God, he gives and he takes away. He wants to kill your baby. Yeah, I mean, just all these false theologies that they have. It makes a lot more sense, and that's what we're ultimately here for. If we weren't here for a purpose greater than just this life, then he would take us out when we get converted. And it's more, and I do agree with you. And this is where I'm very Catholic. It's for sanctification. It's for a purgation type issue in life and perhaps afterlife. I'm still negotiating that. And there's still that is true. But ultimately, even dealing with sin, it's more than just sin management. He wants us to be the kind of people that one day, his bride, we're going to judge the watchers. That's a big deal. I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, it really is.
See, I think one of the things that we have to address is one of many reasons for church hopping. And that's because many churches will focus specifically on theology, morality, personal growth. I mean,
yeah,
we can go to a self-help seminar only so many times before we're starting to really need to be hearing about being delivered, receiving some kind of miraculous, psychological healing, transformation in the mind, whatever it is. And what do you think it is that's causing these people, these modern churches, to basically not address the supernatural? What's going on here?
You named it right there. That word, modern. I mean, it comes from nominalism. It comes from modernity, and I was just reading this week where that whole that whole mindset. I mean, what about this? I mean, and I'm going to throw this out here about Anglicans who believe in the real presence. If you believe in the real presence, what is it doing in you that's really re-enchanting you? I mean, what is it? I mean, and we've seen, Sandy and I have seen people healed or delivered from the Eucharist. It's power. It's spiritual power. It's the body and blood of Jesus Christ, like for real. And if people get that, it's going to cause something. And I'm sorry I'm harping on that, but I think that's important. And we need spiritual weapons to fight spiritual battles. And we have that right there that in a worship service is put up. And then in some, I've been a part of churches where we have adoration, Eucharistic adoration too. And in areas like that. But what about in our real lives? That nurturing of that the body and the blood can carry forth. It is spiritual warfare. It can heal our bodies, our souls, our everything. And deliver us from spirits. People forget about that aspect of spiritual warfare, and that's modernity has wiped that out. I recommend that book that we're reading, "Living in Wonder" by Rod Dreher. He's Orthodox, but he is like hitting some stuff out of the park about adopting re-enchantment back into our lives, all the West, and Eastern Orthodox people might not want to admit this, but they're part of the West just as much as we are. They have the whole Western mindset and concept, and so we have got to. I mean, mission. I've had friends that were priests that did missions over in like Asian countries and stuff like that, and re-enchantment is not an issue because they live the supernatural worldview. As a matter of fact, missionaries go into it all the time, BT, and they lack spiritual power. So they go to the witch doctor when they need something and then they go back to church on Sunday mornings. I mean, they're forced to be like that. And it's not their fault. We lack the re-enchantment. We lack the spiritual power. And I'm not talking about just, flamboyant crusades with signs and wonders and Benny Hinn throwing his jacket around. I'm not talking about junk like that. I'm talking about missionaries really being able to walk in power like Jesus did and bring the spiritual tools and the spiritual warfare aspects into it, because that's what they need more than anything in those countries is spiritual warfare. And obedience is amazing there. I mean, you tell them something's in the Bible, they'll go obey it immediately. We toy around and have to pray about it for 10 days before we do what God tells us to do. Just like Abraham. They're just like Abraham. It's that Eastern mindset. And we need that Eastern mindset and the re-enchantment back. And then we'll be prepared to handle what's coming in this world, particularly Western culture, modernity.
Yeah, if we were to give some people some practical tips, some practical advice on dealing with their own life circumstances and situations, I can't help but really process and think about some of the stuff that we've been talking about in regards to fasting.
Yeah.
And so some of these spiritual battles, they seem like they're harder to win. And Jesus himself did mention that certain things can only come out by prayer and fasting. Mm-hmm. What do you think fasting does in that spiritual realm that makes this so much more effective?
All right. I have a dual answer there. And I think both are true. I've only heard one preached in the church, but I've kind of went back and did some exegetical stuff. And I think it's twofold. We need to fast because go back to the temptation of Christ. He fasted for 40 days. And when the enemy came to him, he didn't fast for 40 days to be weak, where the enemy could tempt him and all that kind of stuff. I mean, he did tempt him, but that fasting was not a show of weakness. That fasting was a show of strength. I mean, this is shade tree. This is me speculating, but what if Jesus wouldn't have fasted 40 days? What if he would have taken those temptations? I know he wouldn't have, but you get what I'm saying. I think the 40 days of fasting gave him the strength to say no. And Sandy and I, in extended fast, you get to the point where you go after 5 days. If you fast after 5 days, you feel like you don't even need food anymore. It's the most amazing thing in the whole world. And the spiritual sensitivity, and I don't just mean emotional, I mean the spiritual sensitivity that you have when you fast, it just connects you in a way that all right, the dual answer to that, I think in that passage is this. I think this one only comes out by prayer and fasting. This one is not necessarily talking about a demon as much as it is talking about unbelief. And I think unbelief can come out by fear and prayer and fasting. And so it could be possibly, I've done some Greek work with it, that Jesus was saying this only comes out by fear and fasting, because if you look in context, he's talking about their unbelief, why they couldn't get the spirit out. I've never encountered a spirit that I've been up against that said, "Oh, you can't cast me out. You hadn't fasted long enough."
Right. Right.
And I think we read into that, but what it is it's not that they're looking at us and saying, "Oh, they're not fasted up enough." They can tell we're not fasted enough. Like I think about the sons of Sceva, they can tell that we're not fasted up enough because our faith is not there, because we have unbelief, and we go into the deliverance with unbelief. And that's something else that I want to clear up here. That, you can have faith and doubt at the same time. People think they're mutually exclusive, but I mean, I have so many areas where I have faith, man. I just know that I know that I know. And then I have areas of doubt that just torment me. And it's almost like they're two horse. I don't know what the word I'm looking for. Two horses that are pulling against each other. Which one's going to win, the faith or the doubt? And whichever one I feed is the faith. The faith or the doubt. And I think fasting feeds the faith. I think fasting eradicates unbelief in our lives as well. So that's kind of my answer about there. It's both. I think it's both. We don't have to choose.
Yeah, I just think here at the heart of deliverance ministry is basically the promise of freedom. And I don't mean like freedom from like bad habits or emotional struggles, but real spiritual freedom. And I think that's the kind of stuff that breaks those unseen chains and restores, lives. And so what do we do with this? Do we ignore it? Do we consider it outdated? Or do we lean in and ask, what if this is real? What if these struggles go beyond the natural, require some kind of supernatural response?
Shalom is my word for it, BT. That's just the best Jewish word because it encapsulates everything that our English language can't encapsulate. It's peace. It's
peace that
it's freedom.
It's all understanding.
It's just shalom. I mean, it really is.
So what kind of concluding thoughts do you have about this? A story, something that you've seen people recover from? Like you said, you've done ministry with some people who are dealing with drugs and addictions and things like that, being delivered from those things.
Yeah.
But what's a good, powerful story that we can take away from the power of deliverance and why we should give it a little bit more weight than we have been?
I'll give you an example of a guy, and he I don't think he'll hear this, but he probably won't know who he is. But he's a guy that we ministered to just one time, and that's what amazes me. BT is sometimes we think it's going to be, and look, sanctification and theosis and all that is time. It takes time, okay, but sometimes deliverance is just it's mysterious. We have to recover a mystery there. But we saw him one time. He had a few what we call soul ties, which I'm not going to get into that, but they're basically just connections to people that it was his ex-wife. We broke a few soul ties, and he has been clean now for, probably getting close to 6 or 7 years, which is really huge for meth addicts. And he's part of the small percent. And he got a hold of me the other day and said, "Look, I just want to thank you and Sandy for being there, for doing this." And that's what we were doing for the ministry. The woman that does the ministry, she was doing a lot of the she does a lot of the Bible study and the left brain cognitive, all that good stuff that needs to be done. You need the info in there for your brain to be able to do anything with it. We call it the filing cabinet is what we call it. And, but we were also doing the heart work is what we like to call it. The heart work, the emotional intelligence. And he just out of the blue said, "Thank you. I mean, I'm sober." And it was that easy. That's what he said. It was just that easy. And I was like, well, it's not always that easy. You were blessed, but it was a mystery. But I just think about that I used to skateboard when I was a kid. I had plenty of scars and stuff for it. And one of the hardest things that I did was drop it in on a half pipe. If you don't know what that is, then look it up. Skateboarders like to drop in. And I was petrified of it as a 13-year-old. I was just like, because you have to pump and you have to like bend down and keep yourself on the board, or the board will fly out from underneath you if you drop in. And we're talking about almost straight up and down vertical when you drop in on a half pipe. And I finally just got to the point where I would just do it. I would just drop in. And that example is just life to me now. When I'm afraid, when I don't know what to do, and I just remember that time when I just dropped in. And if my board was going to fly, because it did a few times, but I just kept dropping in, and I finally learned how to do it. And it's just do it, and that's what I would recommend to everybody out there is just do it and get somebody around you. This is super important. This is why we need a body of Christ, the church. Get somebody around you that's experienced in this, that can help you and train you in this. Don't just receive ministry. Also learn to pay it forward, so to speak, too. Get it and then learn how to do it to pay it forward to others. I think that's crucial in discipleship and in what we're doing with this. And it's not hard. It's just a simple matter of understanding in your heart who Jesus made you to be when you were regenerated. Whether you were regenerated in baptism as a Catholic or whether you were regenerated later as an evangelical, that's not the point. The point is you were regenerated, you receive new life, begin to know know the authority that came with that new life. And you'll start to see amazing things in others' lives. So that would be that'd be my little bit of advice. But just find somebody to mentor you.
There's something that's important, and I think a good takeaway from this would be to just, if people are struggling and they're having a hard time with whatever it is, right? Whatever your experiences or your questions or even your doubts, that conversation about deliverance is not that far away. Mm-hmm. Brandon, you operate with your wife, Sandy, the Unrefined.podcast.com, and you've opened up a membership ability there for people, to have a subscription for the year or monthly or whatever they want to do. But there's so many extra added perks, and one of those perks is being able to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And reach out and talk to you guys and say, hey, we're struggling here. Let's figure out something we can do and pray for me about this, that, and the other thing. There's a lot of members within the Unrefined Friends family that have utilized this benefit.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be great if you could just talk about that and where people can, obviously I've already mentioned Unrefined podcast,
Yeah.
It's, I'm a host over there with you and Lindsay Waters too. And,
yeah.
And I do stuff with Sandy and it's a great thing to be part of, but I think it'd be great if you could just tell the audience, where your heart is in that and what they can expect and all those things.
Yeah, one of the things that I say all the time, and some of it's to remind myself, because let's face it, the podcast world can be a real dog eat dog and competitive and all that kind of stuff. And my wife is constantly on me just to keep my eyes on my own paper. That's our thing we say. But to me, Unrefined, we just want to put out good content and love people. And part of the members thing, and this is not always members. Now, I'm not opening up to get 100 people to but I do help people that are members too, because it's just my heart. I'm a priest, and I just love people, and I've been through hell and back, and it changed me, and so, yeah, that's part of what we offer in the members only is one-on-one time right now while we can. And, when it gets bigger, that might have, but it would be really awesome if people out there too, who have the same heart that want to minister to people, want to be trained to minister to people, to come on board. And I wish I had, I'm watching BT here. I'm gonna brag on him. He has this Bible study he's doing for men, and it is, dude. I've been a part of other men's ministries, and it was so huge. There's no relationship, and this thing, these men are sharing their hearts, and I feel safe as a minister. See, ministers, you guys, we have no safe place, because when we admit our faults or what we struggle with, it becomes gossip. And I feel safe in this group. And I'm not going to share, obviously, what I've shared with them, but I've shared some pretty tough stuff, and I'm going to probably share some more here soon. But I feel safe with these guys, and BT is doing an excellent job of that. So, yeah, that's I think why we clicked, BT and I, is because it's about people.
Fantastic, Brandon. I appreciate you coming on my show, and thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, bro.
Thank you for listening. This is a free podcast based upon the value for value model. If you find value in this, or any episode, you can return that value by liking the show, subscribing to this channel, leaving a review, or sharing with a friend on your social media accounts. You can also donate on my website. Thank you again. This is BT for Truth and Shadow Podcast. You are the light in the darkness.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's about people. People are what matter, and not in some new age universe self-help way, but in a self-giving, love Trinitarian way. People matter. That's why we do it. That's why BT does it too. He'll never admit it, but that's why he does it too.